Make us worthy to pray thankfully, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptations, deliver us from the evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord, thine is the kingdom, power, glory forever and ever. Amen. Name the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. It's our pleasure today to have Nardeen Awadalla with us. Nardeen is actually one of our daughters who left Winnipeg here to pursue study, and her actually achievement includes a lot of extremely rewarding accomplishment in both personal, academic, and interpersonal. Nardeen actually holds a doctorate degree of clinical psychology. She is a very active member with deep involvement in social justice initiative, and she is part of a program development team who actually takes care of developing this area to counselor. She also supervises the master's level counseling students. Despite her young age, Nardeen is just early 30s, and she's doing now counseling, and she's doing academic work. So there are tons and tons of things that we can learn from Nardeen, whether in the mood disorder or anxiety disorder or trauma or relationship or couple interaction. So I just don't want to waste the time just talking about Nardeen and how great Nardeen is, because I want you to listen and see for yourself. And feel free at the end to ask whatever question you might have. تفضلي Nardeen.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting to listen to. No, thank you. It's really nice to.
Nardeen بنت دكتور علي.
Yes, Doctor. Yeah, his daughter, the person that's right there.
So Ala and Hala are Nardeen's parents. You should be very proud of Nardeen. Can everybody mute the mic until you have to speak? Yes.
We are so proud of her, Abuna. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, thank you all. So today I wanted to spend some time talking about conflicts and conflict resolution in partnerships and like intimate relationships, or really these things we can use them for any sort of relationship. Sorry, just one second. I can hear my echo. I'm going to have to turn it off.
Very well, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, I think this is better now. I think I could hear Baba because he's here. Okay, so I will share my screen. You would think after months of having to do everything over Zoom, I'd have this completely figured out and it would be super smooth. But of course, that's not how it works. So give me 2 seconds. Okay, cool. Awesome. So I tried to set this up into a how-to guide just so that we can have some very practical things we can take moving forward. In terms of how to engage in conflict and conflict resolution. Honestly, the way that I like to think of it, I don't even like to think of these situations as conflicts. I just think of them as opportunities to practice effective communication. So let's get started. So just to start off, when we talk about conflict or whenever there's disagreements, we need to recognize the fact that they're not coming from any sort of place of animosity or wanting to hurt other people. At the core of it, if we look at any sort of conflict, it is about someone trying to get some sort of need met. And we all have needs. We all have emotional needs, we have physiological needs, we need to eat, we need to drink, we need to be able to rest, we need to feel safe, we need to feel heard, we need to feel supported, These are all very basic human needs that we can try and say that we don't need them, or we can try and do it all ourselves. But in the end, we're human beings. We sometimes need support and we have needs. So the way I think of it is that conflicts can be a really clumsy way of trying to get our needs met. So for me, I would prefer that people engage in disagreement or dialogue instead of trying to just let go of these needs, because we can end up in a pattern where we try to let things go. And if there's a specific need that we're actually just not getting met, we're going to start creating some surface level problems, some arguments about things that don't really matter, and we're not going to get to the core of the issue. And we're going to start getting into this cycle where we're always fighting about things that don't really matter. And in the end, we're going to start building resentment. And once resentment builds, that's a much bigger issue to have to deal with. So the goal is to try and figure out what's going on, how can we address it in the moment, and move on to bigger and better things. So like I said, conflicts are unavoidable and they are acceptable. It's normal and it's healthy. The thing is, it can look very different sometimes. There can be screaming matches. People can give the silent treatment. People can try to let things go. People can be passive aggressive sometimes. They can make little comments but pretend that everything is okay. Or it can be directly addressed. And I think this is one of the main issues with relationships. People don't think that when they think of conflict, they think of an argument, they think of something negative, whereas it can be an argument or a disagreement can just be a negotiation, and it doesn't need to become this really big or bad thing. One of the things that it's really helpful for people when they're starting out in a relationship or even a friendship is learning how to fight in a way that's healthy. A lot of times people try to avoid arguments, and that's not realistic. The main point is that we need to learn how to argue in a way that is effective and supportive, and in the end, everyone gets their needs met. So I want to give a caveat that there can be times when these conversations go wrong. And the main culprit is that we are engaging in this conversation, trying to get our needs met, but the way it happens, we end up with the other person feeling like they're being attacked. And if the other person feels like they're being attacked, they're going to have to defend themselves. If someone is defending themselves when you're upset, you're going to get more upset. And then we're going to end up in this nonstop cycle. So we need to recognize that each person has needs, and each of their needs are important. We need to be able to express ourselves, but we also need to do it in a way where it's not going to get the other person to feel like they're attacked and feel like they need to defend themselves. So it's, it comes down to just having a little bit of wisdom and a little bit of strategy in doing this. So before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the conflict itself, we need to recognize that there have to be some basics before we get into these situations. For two people to get into an argument and have it end in a successful way, there needs to be an understanding that you're on the same team and that the goal is to reach a resolution to a problem. There has to be a sense of trust. If we're wondering whether the other person actually has our best interests at heart, then there's an issue there, and we need to address that. If there's a thought or perception in our mind that the other person wants to hurt us, then we need to take a step back and figure out what's going on there. To be able to engage in a healthy discussion or argument, we will need to be able to trust the other person. And that takes time, and that's a whole other story. And I'm sure Father Kyrillos, that's your domain of building that healthy basis. But having that understanding that both people have the same goal of having a continued relationship and to try and make the other person feel okay is really necessary. So another thing before we get into the nitty gritty is that we can't play games. A lot of times there can be an issue, there's a need. It can have something to do with the person, or it can have something to do with something else. You can be stressed out from a person at work. You can feel overloaded with the amount of demands that are on your time. You can just be tired and hungry. Or the person could have done something that really frustrated you. It doesn't matter what the issue is. It just matters that we know the specific problem and that we're clear about it. We don't want to play games. We don't want to go into these patterns of trying to get the person to feel bad. There are a few games that people can play, this poor me situation where we just feel like we're being victimized, where deep down we know we're not being victimized, but we want the person across from us to maybe feel guilty. So if we can think of an example, I can be coming home after a long day of work and I expected my partner to have dinner for me and they didn't have dinner ready for me. I can directly say, hey, I'm feeling really tired and I was hoping dinner would be ready. Or I can go and sit in the corner on the couch and just grumble about how hungry I am and what a long day I've had and all of these things. Another thing that we can fall into is this idea of see what you made me do. There can be an issue that we have a problem with, and instead of addressing it in that moment, we let it play out, and then there's going to be like a negative consequence at the end. And then when that happens, we'll be like, oh, see what you made me do, rather than we addressing it right in the moment. Another piece is the silent treatment. A lot of people shut down as a way of punishing someone. That's not a great cycle to get into. There's the yes, but, where you're trying to just prove your point. A really dangerous one is that if you loved me, then. In a lot of these games, you can see that there's an accusation of the other person, or there's an attack that they did something to you and that you, it just becomes kind of adversarial. It's as if someone is trying to win the fight. And then there's the martyr complex that sometimes happens where one person will just not ever express what their needs are. And then resentment can get built up, but then it's almost like there's something about feeling like you're not getting your needs met that makes you feel like you're better than the other person, or you're taking on more. And that's not fair for you or your partner. Both people deserve to be in a relationship where they can get their needs met and that they feel comfortable and they feel safe and they feel like they can live their lives rather than be trying to strategize how to get things done. That's exhausting. Life is so hard anyway. We don't need our relationships to be another battlefield. So establishing the fact that both people have best intentions, we are trying to get our needs met. Let's just be straightforward about it, not play games. Life is really exhausting. We don't need another thing to think about. Anyone have thoughts, feelings about any of these pieces so far? Any questions?
Any comment or question so far, guys? I actually like your introductory slide where you presented the idea that conflicts are not always bad. And I always mention that One of the books I read talks about crisis and trauma, people in crisis, and the author had the word crisis on the front page, which made of two syllables in Chinese. The first part means problem, but the second part means opportunity. And that's exactly what conflicts are. They present opportunity through an issue. And I like that very much.
That's a great way to see it. And I think the underlying basis there is that human beings aren't these vicious people. There is always, whenever there's an issue, there is an opportunity for growth that can actually get you and can end you up in a better place than if that situation hadn't happened in the first place. So, all right. So, I promise this is the last thing before I get into the tips. I really have a very important public service announcement for every single person listening to this. You can't read minds, and neither can your partner. I know people think I've been with my husband or wife for 30 years. I know them inside out. I know exactly what they're thinking. I know exactly what they mean. And I'm telling you, you don't. Because there are so many things that go into what someone is feeling in that moment that you don't have access to it. And I don't know how to overemphasize this point because it brings so many couples into therapy. They have the best of intentions, but we make so many assumptions. And let's just make an agreement to just not make assumptions because it's exhausting and a huge waste of time. So let's not assume that you know what your partner means. Don't guess, imagine, take for granted, or even make interpretations about what their facial expressions mean or their gestures mean. You can see the way they're acting and have an idea. And it's okay to ask them and to clarify and say, hey, what are you thinking? Hey, I noticed you're frowning a little. What's going on? You could save yourself thousands of dollars in couples therapy bills if you do this one thing of just checking in. And I think sometimes our society just tells us that we have to be efficient, and making assumptions feels efficient, and it's really, really not. So it's okay to ask and to check. It takes a second and it can save you a lifetime of hurt. Equally, don't expect your partner to read your mind. Just because you are kind of sulking in a corner doesn't mean they're going to know that they forgot to take out the trash or something like that. I'm giving really cliche examples. I don't know why my mind is like that right now, but just bear with me. But the point of this is that we really need to be direct and tell them what you're thinking, and ask them what they're thinking. And yeah, I can't emphasize that enough. Just take a moment and check. Is what I'm thinking actually true, or is it not? You want to make sure that you're living in the same world, seeing the same things, so then you can work on the same problem, because two people can be trying so hard to do their best, but if they're looking at different problems, they're not going to be working together and they're going to frustrate each other. And that's really heartbreaking to see when two people are both trying their best and they end up hurting the other. And a quick way to avoid that is just checking in. So, promised that we would actually get to the how-tos, and this is the first one. First part of how to have a healthy conflict is by showing your commitment to resolution. That you guys have established that you're on the same team, that there's a need that's not being met, and that we want to get to a resolution so that both partners feel okay. Some basics about staying respectful. It sounds really obvious, but it can be very hard to do when the emotions are coming up. One way to manage those emotions is by reminding yourself that you are on the same team, that you are trying to come to a resolution, and that you're not trying to win an argument. Even the way that you're sitting can affect this. You can try and sit next to each other. You can try to have physical touch, hold hands as you're talking, just to have something to remind you that you're not in a fight and it's not about winning. You also want to be careful of nonverbal expressions. Eye rolling is actually, we have research that says eye rolling is one of those things that can be a huge predictor for a really messy divorce in 5 years, because it shows that there's a lack of respect for the other person, and it's kind of in a passive way. So those things, they might seem like they're small, but they can have really huge impacts on relationships in the long run. We want to make sure that there's no sarcasm or name calling. All of these things get us in modes where, again, it's going to be a fight. Someone has to win, someone has to lose, and that's not going to make for a nice environment to live in or experience. Another piece in showing your commitment to resolution is not making threats. Threats will never work. A threat is an attack, and when someone's attacked, they're going to try to protect themselves, and they will often, their pride will come in. It's just not going to work. A lot of times, threats will also increase feelings of unsafety. You're not going to feel safe with your partner if you feel like there is the threat that something bad will happen. And when we don't have that feeling of safety, that feeling of trust in a relationship, the entire system kind of goes awry. So even if the person doesn't mean the threat, when that threat is put out there, it puts this like little poison in the relationship soup that kind of lingers. So we want to be really careful with all of these pieces, the nonverbal expressions, the threats, and any sort of expression of disrespect. Thoughts, feelings about that? No? Good? Okay, cool. So the second part is that we need to focus on the problem and not on the person. So we want to be very specific about what the problem is.
Maria.
Sorry, did someone have?
If anybody has a comment, just you can raise your hand and we'll let you talk right away.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't see everyone. So if you don't mind letting me know, Buna, that'd be great.
Absolutely, Habibi.
Awesome. So focusing on the problem and not the person. So a lot of times when something comes up for us and we don't feel great, the first thing is like, who did this to us, or what happened? Or so instead of saying who did this to us, we can say what happened, and try to be very specific about what's going on with you, specific about how you're feeling, specific about the facts of the situation. And in that when you're that specific, you're able to deal with one issue at a time, and you're able to actually identify a specific problem that you could work on managing. Related to that, we want to avoid generalizing it, especially when we're talking to someone. Instead of saying, you always do this, or you never do this. When we're exaggerating, we lose our credibility, because it's not true. It's not true that they never do something or that they always do something. So those kinds of statements, again, you lose the sense of credibility, and it feels like an attack, because it feels like you're trying to make something bigger. But if we try to stay very focused on the specific thing, we have a target that we can work towards. So you'll notice some of these themes are that we're trying to be able to express ourselves effectively without triggering defensiveness from the other person. And this doesn't mean you tiptoe around things. It just is being mindful of the natural human inclination to feel like you have to defend yourself if you're attacked. Another piece when you're trying to figure out what the problem is noticing if you're having similar patterns of fights, especially if they're very surface level, that keep coming up over and over and over again. If you notice that pattern, it's a good time to try and dig a little deeper and figure out underlying that main issue that is stressing you out in the moment. What's the theme? What's going on under there? Is there a certain assumption or a certain pattern in the relationship that is not working for you? And if that's the case, it's just a lot more efficient to go and to that specific need versus having surface level fights about it. So there can be a need of feeling supported. If you're not feeling supported in a relationship, you can have so many different fights about how the dinner isn't ready, or how the person isn't checking in, bringing you water when they bring themselves water. It can be something as simple as that. That's not actually the issue. You can go and get yourself a glass of water, but if there's a general feeling that you're not being cared for, that needs to be addressed, and you should kind of go to the core of the situation rather than persisting in these little surface level fights. Because at some point you might trick yourself into thinking we're just an unhappy couple because we have all of these different issues. But all of these different issues could actually come down to a few basic core needs that we have in relationships. Any questions, thoughts, feelings? I can move on to the next. So, how-to number 3, how to express your feelings. I feel like every human being should spend a whole year in a course learning how to do this, because it is very, very difficult. It feels very scary to express having needs. It feels like you might be being needy. It feels like you might be being dramatic. You might feel like you should be able to figure it all out by yourself. And that's just not how God created us or designed us. We are created to need others. We are created to have insecurities, and it's okay to be able to express it. We can try so hard to pretend that they're not there, and it's still going to come up. So why don't we just get to the point and get comfortable with expressing the feelings? We do that by being direct and honest about our feelings, which means that we need to be honest with ourselves first about what our feelings are, and then expressing them to the other person. One of the first things that couples will learn how to do is using I statements. And a lot of people roll their eyes when we talk about I statements. Oh, did someone try to say something?
Guys, mute yourself if you are not talking.
Okay. So with I statements, you share a concern by beginning your sentence with I. There's like a formula. It's, I feel something when you something. It seems so silly, but that one format can save hours and years of hurt. With this one format, you're taking responsibility for your own emotion. You're saying, I'm the person that's having this emotion. You're not necessarily blaming the other person, but you're also letting them know what they can do to help you in this situation or to lessen that situation. So in the end, you're going to let them know that something needs to change, but you do it in a way that doesn't trigger that defensiveness. You're taking responsibility for the feeling you're having, and you're also allowing the person to give you a gift of changing something. And that's the main idea behind conflict resolution, is trying to change our way of thinking from I'm going to change the person to I'm going to give them the opportunity to support me. Again, there has to be that trust or that assumption that you both want to be there for each other and that you trust the other person has good intentions for you. But if you have that basis, we can think of any conflict as an opportunity to allow the other person to support us. And that's actually a gift that we give them. So this is all nice and dandy in theory. And it takes so long to practice how to actually have these conversations. So it's going to get loud. It's going to get uncomfortable. That's a part of learning how to do this. What we need to do, though, is to learn to pause the conversation if it starts getting personal. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But just know that learning how to express yourself is a new skill and will take practice to learn how to do that in a way that helps you get your needs met. Any questions, thoughts, feelings about expressing your feelings? It's your chance to practice.
Any question, guys? Any comment? I just want to make a little bit of warning here. The I statement, obviously, as you said, is the best, but make sure that you don't also play game, as Nardeen said, with the I statement. Like, I feel that you're extremely terrible is not acceptable in relationship resolution, I guess, right?
Yeah, so this format has very specific requirements. When you, the part after when you, thank you for bringing that up actually. I feel, and then there's an emotion that you're feeling. And the when you, there has to be a specific behavior. It can't be when you are a jerk, when you are whatever. Like, it has to be a very specific behavior that a person knows how to change. So I feel really stressed out when you give me a huge list of things that need to be done all at the same time. There's a resolution to that. We can have it so that the list is broken up or whatever. We need a specific behavior that can be changed. And that pro tip at the bottom is, if a disagreement becomes personal, you should pause the conversation. If when you're trying to have express yourself, you end up kind of accusing the person of something or saying, I feel sad when you are an idiot, you're going to need to take a second, pause the conversation and walk away, because in those moments, things can escalate very quickly, and it can seem like it's not a big deal, but it can actually cause not irreversible harm, but harm that will always stay there to some extent. So if we can avoid getting to the point where conversations get personal and become about someone's character, we want to do that. We want to create specific behavior that we would like to be changed. Okay, again, some things that seem very basic, but they really aren't. Well, they are basic, but they're very difficult to do, and they can have great impact. How to speak and listen. There are some kind of physiological hacks that you can do. When we're talking at a lower volume, it actually gets the other person to have to attend more, focus more, and it makes us, it kind of calms the entire situation. Even if people are being loud at a party because they're having a lot of fun, our nervous system is actually going to be at a higher level and be more ready to kind of be in fight or flight, or try and see if there might be a problem coming up. That's just our basic physiology and the way that we are designed to deal with possible threats. So speaking softly isn't just about being polite. It's about making sure that our nervous system is also ready to engage in problem solving versus like a fight or flight situation. It's also really important to give time and listen. In a conflict, there are two people. Yes, the person has to express themselves, but they also need to know that they're being heard. We can sit there and try to express ourselves for 17 hours. And if we don't feel like someone is hearing it or something is going to change, we are completely wasting our time. So it's important to be mindful of when you're going to have conversations. Make sure that the other person is in a state where they will be able to listen. You can also do that by asking, because we don't want to assume. And express yourself. And then the other person, their role is that they are going to listen and show you that they're listening. One way that they can do that is to kind of say back what it is that you just said to them. That shows that they're listening. It shows that they're committed to understanding what you're saying. And it's also a way for them to check to see if they got it right. Because sometimes we hear something and we put it through our own filter and we make an assumption about what it means. And sometimes we're wrong. So again, it just makes things more efficient. It might feel like kind of useless to be saying the same thing over and over. But again, trust me, and we have so much data that tells us taking that second to check and to make sure that you're getting something right can just, it does save relationships. Another thing, a tip for the listener, when you're listening, try to focus on the words that are being said and think about the fact that you're going to have to retell this instead of thinking about what you're going to say next. I would recommend that you don't think about what you're going to say next until you've checked with the person that you heard them correctly and they've confirmed that you do understand what they're saying. At that point, then you can start thinking about how you want to respond. Because if you're already trying to think of an answer when you're not even sure you heard them correctly, you're again tempting yourself to get into a cycle of two people looking at different problems and trying to solve them and getting upset at the other for not understanding them. Thoughts, feelings about that one? Any questions? No?
I have a question, but I want to leave it to the end. If you're going to take questions at the end, it's about how they know how I feel, because you say you want me to say, I feel this when this happens. But if I am feeling like an avalanche of feelings, I'm feeling, and I really can't put my hand on the specific feeling that I don't know if I'm feeling ignored or I'm feeling attacked or I'm feeling sad. There is a huge, like, we are not trained to understand how we feel. This is very big ask that you are telling me you want me to know how I feel. I know it sounds like very basic. No. But often, honestly, I do not know how I feel. I feel like boiling, or as you're saying, doing body language that's inappropriate. Or like making myself look like a martyr or victim. Or, oh my God, he's so like forgiving, where inside me I'm just feeling I don't want even to talk, because if I talk, things will go wrong. And if it goes wrong, I love this person so much and I don't want things to go wrong. So I'm actually shushing myself, because the person in front of me, whether this my daughter, my wife, my work colleague, my whoever, is too precious for me to risk the discussion. So I'll shut up. I'll be quiet.
So there's a couple of things there. Number one, great point. The majority of the time, none of us actually know what we're feeling. And to try and figure that out, we can only do it because you can sit and think about it by yourself for the rest of your life and get lost in the philosophical musings of your own mind. But a part of a relationship is also having the space to say, hey, I'm feeling something. I don't know what it is. Even if you don't know what's going on, you'll start to notice an urge. What is the urge that you're feeling? Are you feeling an urge to attack? Are you feeling an urge to run away? Are you feeling an urge to withdraw and just have no one see you? A lot of times, the urge that we feel tells us a little bit about what is the core emotion that we're feeling. And everyone has their own kind of specific patterns, but take a moment and think about what it is that you want to do. So sometimes when I am so frustrated, but I don't even know what I want from the other person, for me, I have to recognize that I just need to be heard. In that moment, it will be helpful for me to have my frustration seen, and then maybe I'll be able to understand what's going on with the frustration. The worst thing that we can do with a strong emotion is try to keep it in. We want to make sure that we don't hurt others with our emotions, but we also want to create a culture in our own family where it's okay to have an emotion and know that that emotion is not an attack on the other person. And I think that's where we get confused. We feel like if we have an emotion, we are saying to the other person, you did something wrong, or you are not enough for me, you did not support me, or you did not. And that's not what it is. Again, if we go back to the idea of the I statements, I feel overwhelmed, or I feel confused, or I feel stressed out. And that when you doesn't have to exist. That when you, instead of saying, I feel stressed when you do this, you can also say, I feel stressed. Can you sit with me while I try to figure this out? Or I feel stressed. Can you give me some space while I try to figure this out? It's okay to need time and to need space to figure out your feelings, but you also want to make sure that the other person knows that's what's going on and doesn't think that the emotion that you're having is something to do with them if it doesn't necessarily have to do with them. You might not know if it has to do with them or not, but that's your work to try and figure out. Once you have figured that out, then you can kind of come to them and share. If you feel like you can have a conversation in a way that doesn't make the other person feel attacked, you can also try to figure out your emotion with the person. But again, you want to have a gauge on your own communication skills and your partner's sensitivity, because all of these skills are things that are kind of the goal, but it takes a long time to get there, and it takes practice, and it takes establishing new kind of relationship norms. And that's very difficult, and a lot of times that doesn't happen until there's been a threat of a divorce, or the lawyers have been called in and then people come in, or there's been like a huge disaster. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. And Baba, if you have a question, do you have a follow-up to that, or is it another question?
No, I have just a question.
Okay.
If I want to go through this, please come and sit with me, or I don't know how this is working in my brain. I need more time. is there a formula or there a recipe how to make sure that my partner or my friend or my coworker does not take this one and feel neglected or feel that?
Absolutely.
How would I make him feel that for sure, I'm not attacking you. For sure, I'm not against you. I'm just like not knowing what's happening.
Yeah, I do have a secret recipe, actually. Thank you for giving me a chance to put it out there. My secret recipe is point number 2, I believe, which is, again, expressing yourself, telling the person exactly what you said to me. You can tell the person, hey, like, I don't know what's going on. I don't want you to feel like this is on you, but I need some time to just figure it out. And just saying, hey, this isn't you, giving them maybe like something that makes them feel affirmed. Again, in your relationship, you're going to have discussions about what that looks like, and have those conversations before you're in an argument. A lot of the times we try to figure out how to do these things when we're already in an argument, and that's not helpful. And that's why in the beginning I said we need to learn how to have arguments. We need to have discussions about, hey, when I'm this way, it's helpful for me to have this. What should I do to make sure that you feel heard or that you don't feel attacked? You actually have to have conversations about how to fight when you're not fighting, so that when you're fighting, you already have the formula. You don't have to figure out the formula when your emotions are high, because when your emotions are high, the part of your brain that can problem solve and be rational is literally offline. So you can kind of take that out of the equation. So you bring up a good point. You need to have discussions about how to make sure that the other person here's what you're trying to say in the way that you mean it. And that can be a whole other talk in and of itself. I'm aware of the time though, so I'm going to move on to the next slide, and I'm happy to stay on later if other people have questions or thoughts or feelings, but I just want to make sure I get through the information for people that do have to leave. Kate, next part is that we need to have a plan of action. Again, with the assumption that both people are there with good intentions, there's a basis of trust that both people want the other person to feel good. So remember that the idea is not to win, but to come to a solution that's satisfactory to both of you. And this is a really big point. A lot of times in relationships, people will get into roles. I'll be the person that forgives. I'll be the person that gets what I need. I'm the person that gets angry, or I'm the person that, and that is not sustainable, but it can become this pattern that can keep going for years. And in the end, you find that it's not a relationship that's left. There is a person there that is a shell of who they used to be. So again, both people need to get their needs met, which means that both people need to express their needs, and the solution has to be okay for both people. It doesn't mean that both people are happy with the situation. There's going to be times when a person gets what they want, the other person doesn't, but there needs to be an understanding that it balances out in the end, and that you make that decision based on the specific situation, not just because this one person is the one that usually gets their needs met. And a way of doing this is also brainstorming ideas and then proposing different solutions and inviting your partner to do the same thing. It's not that you're coming into a situation with a goal in mind and you're saying, this is what needs to be done. You're coming into the situation with a problem that as a couple, you are going to try to solve. You both get to come up with ideas of how to deal with the situation. And I think that's a very different way of looking at conflict. It's not about having the solution ahead of time. It's about coming to the solution together through dialogue. And there's going to be times when the problem is really complex and very emotional, and you're not going to be able to come to a solution. in those situations, we want to make sure that we take a time out and we don't engage in that intense discussion for more than 30 minutes at a time. After 30 minutes, your ability to come up with problem solving and to try to actually be engaged in a useful way without getting irritated or pissed off at the person because they're not getting you reaches a limit. So take the 30 minutes and then take a time out. If you haven't reached a solution, agree that you're going to take some time away. Take that time, reflect on how you're feeling, go for a run, do whatever you need to do. But remember to set a time and a day that you're going to get back together to discuss the situation. You never want to walk away from a discussion without knowing exactly when you're going to come back to it to resolve it, because we don't want to let any of these kind of situations kind of wither away or we forget about it, because when it comes around again, it's just going to be that much more intense, because there's going to be a feeling of resentment that it wasn't solved the first time. So even if you can't come to a conclusion, make sure that you create a specific day or time that you're going to come back to discuss this again. If you can do it the same day, that's ideal. If not, schedule it in and actually put it in your phone. You want the other person to know that you both want to know that you're both taking it seriously. So yeah, that's another thing to keep in mind. So we've talked a lot about like the intensity when there's conflict and how much work it takes to get through a conflict and how much work it takes to prepare for a conflict before you've had a conflict, even in creating these norms in your relationship. We don't want to forget that relationships are supposed to be in the end net positive. So we want to make time to reconnect and enjoy time with your partner, especially if there's been conflict that's come up. Try to plan a date night, try to plan just going and sitting together and having tea and talking about a funny story you heard about. Anything that feels like it brings you a moment of joy. These moments build a buffer for the fights that happen, and it also builds trust, and it gives you something to want to work for. Why do we sit and argue with our partner when, well, part of it is it's really hard to get a divorce in our church sometimes. The other part is that we want to be with a person, but we need to remember why we want to be with this person. We want to remember the joy that we feel, the love that we feel, the fun that we feel, the enjoyable conversations that we can have. There has to be a reason that you're in the relationship other than we're married and we're Coptic. It's kind of a joke, but also not, because a lot of times we live such busy lives that we're just trying to get through the day. We're trying to get through work. We're trying to get through looking after the kids. There isn't that time to actually enjoy the other person, but it's incredibly important because that's what keeps, gives you the fuel to be able to put in the energy to just live life as a human being, existing with another human being. Both of you have your own needs. Both of you have your own insecurities, and you're both trying to just exist. So I know that there are no like magic pills or magic like answers to things, but we do have one in relationships, and this is backed up by a ton of data. And we have a ratio for how to have a satisfying relationship. And it's literally a ratio of 5-1. Couples that have 5 positive moments for every 1 negative moment will actually rate their relationship as being satisfying. What's surprising is that you could have couples that are arguing literally 10 times a day in huge blowout arguments. But if they're having 50 moments of enjoyable connection, they will actually experience their relationship as satisfying. Now, someone looking into the relationship might be like, wow, this is really unhealthy. This is really toxic. And at this point, I've realized that we can never have any sort of judgment about someone else's relationship, because we don't know what it's like to actually be in that. We might be seeing that fight, but we might not be seeing the moments that make it worth it. Sometimes there's couples that we think of like, how are they still together? And there could be a reason that they're together that is healthy. There could be many unhealthy reasons, of course, but I think it's just, this highlights the fact that just because something is negative doesn't mean we should avoid it. There are things that we can do to balance it out. And I guess the point of this is just to encourage people to take that risk, to have conversations that might be uncomfortable. The reward for that is huge, and the risk, it's there, but it can also be balanced out by putting in more effort to have enjoyable moments and more kind of positive moments. So that, I think, is the conclusion. Oh, and also I had backup from the Bible, because God always has my back. In the Bible, in Proverbs, it says, a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And I think that is so key when it comes to conflict or communication or just anything in a relationship. It's how you say it and not what you say. What you say needs to be said. What you need needs to be expressed, but it's just how do you say it? And again, this doesn't mean we tiptoe around what's going on. It just means being able to do it, express it in a way that ensures you get your need met, rather than hurting the other person and getting their defenses up. So yeah, I guess the bottom line is, you're on one team. At times it can feel like you're in this power struggle. When you're in a power struggle, it's because someone feels unsafe. Let's go back to the basis of finding whether we have that trust, whether we have that sense of safety, and take time to prepare how we want to have arguments, how we want to have conversations that are difficult ahead of time. If you prepare for it, you know how to work with it, and we know it's going to happen. We can try and pretend we're going to have the perfect relationship, and it's not going to work. So yeah, and it's never too late to start adjusting some of these pieces. And on a serious note, sometimes when people have been stuck in these cycles for a long time, it can take getting kind of professional help to figure it out. But there are lots of things that you can do yourself as well. And there are a lot of kind of self-help books that are more useful than others. So if anyone has any questions about any of these pieces, I can give Abuna my contact information, and feel free to reach out if you want any more information about this topic.
Thank you so much for this lovely, well-prepared, well-presented topic. It's really right to the point. And we usually, around this time of the year, we try to have a conflict resolution, a conflict management, talk about issues and divorce and all of that, so that we can cover all aspects of relationship. You've done great job. Thank you so much, Ahri. We are used also to allow people to give comments or questions. So I'm just gonna go in order as far as I see here in my screen, if you are okay with that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yusuf and Mona, if you have a question or comment.
Oh, thank you so much for the talk. It was really a nice talk. We don't have any comments. It's really nice talk.
Okay, thank you, Habibi. Peter and Parthena.
Hi, Abuna. Hi, Nardeen. I have one question. So basically, like your first point was about to speak up on or to talk about what's bothering you. So the point is, it's different between male and female. Like male can speak up or can avoid speak up. So that's like a straightforward point. but female, like they want to talk, but they need someone to ask them first. But based on your theory, it's I have to ask and she's gonna give me an answer and that's it. But in real life, it's not that easy. I have to ask like 100 times or maybe 150 times to get an answer.
So
and in between that, sometimes she gets so emotional and we start another fight, doesn't belong to even what we're talking about. So like, you know, and when you're going for the next one, you regret it, said, okay, I'm gonna ask once. If I didn't get the answer, so thanks God, I'm gonna leave now. You know that? So
oh, sorry, did you have something else or was that the?
no, that was it. That's
Okay.
I just wanna you like I get a like kind of an answer in the middle, like when you said, okay, you can set for 30 minutes and then keep going. So, and that's I think that's a good idea. But that was my question first at the beginning, you know?
Yeah, I think you bring up really great points, and I just want to address a couple of them, because the idea of you have to ask for the partner to kind of say what's going on, I think that's a habit that would be helpful to work on, figuring out why it is that the person feels that they need to be asked in order to say their feelings. Maybe exploring that a little bit, because that changes the power dynamic a little bit. And then it feels like one person it's all on them to do the asking. And I just think it might be helpful to explore why the other person needs to be asked. Is it because they feel they might be annoying the other person? Do they feel like figuring out those pieces? And another point you made about the difference between males and females. So this is something I see a lot when I work with couples. The idea that a lot of men think that they don't necessarily need to talk a lot about these things. And through our work, we actually figure out that that's not necessarily the case. It's just that they have learned how to deal with it in other ways. What we want to notice is that can be really helpful. You could be dealing with it in really good ways. But in other situations, what we see is that thinking with one specific couple, like 25 years down the line, the one partner that felt like they didn't really need to talk about things that much, it did come to a boiling point where he was just kind of done with the relationship. A part of being able to express what you're feeling is that you're also building that connection with the other person. And I think in our society and the way that all of cultures, not just Egyptian culture, has set it up, I think it's been really unfair to males, because it's made it so that they kind of have to do it all themselves sometimes. And I think it might have something to do with the difference in heart issues and other physical ailments that come up. So I appreciate you bringing that up, though, because it does come up a lot, and it's something that is worth looking at.
Yeah, sometimes the way you ask برضه, يعني if you see your partner, whether husband or wife, disappointed, sad, mad, and you go to him and say, إيه مالك أنت هتقرفنا? That's something. And how are you doing? Why are you feeling like that? That's another approach. It depends also on your approach, right? If you keep asking the same person the same way and she or he doesn't answer, it seems like maybe you need to wait a bit, or maybe you need to change your way. But the point and the answer is amazing. Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Nardeen. Miret.
Hello.
Yes.
That was great talk. Great job, Nardeen. You're awesome. I liked your points about like making time to reconnect, because I saw this interesting video that was saying that like one way to work on a conflict without actually talking about it, like you do still have to talk about it, but one way to continue to work on it is to like build the friendship and remember that you're friends, and that builds trust. That was the thing. And then what Bubba was saying about feelings is that, like, when you're having that big feeling and it's like overwhelming and you don't know what you're feeling, like, that is something I think that when I was in like university, I felt I didn't know how to express necessarily how I was feeling, and I'm now learning. And a lot of it is simply like trying to learn it as if you were learning like biology or something else. And you have to sit down and you have to read books and you have to introspect and journal. And then when someone's saying something to you and you're feeling this big feeling, it's like, okay, why am I feeling this? Like, what is going on? And it's like a slow process in order to do that. But we're all gonna get there eventually, maybe, if we put in the effort and we have the time.
I really agree with you and thank you for that. But you make a really great point about how a lot of times emotions actually get expressed in our body. We'll notice that our muscles might get tense. We might notice a funny feeling in our stomach. We might notice feeling lightheaded. So a lot of times, especially for men, that's when they notice that there's an emotion and then they think something is wrong with them physically or that they're tired. So that's another way to notice emotions if you're completely not sure.
In fact, we started in the youth group now to speak about emotions. We had covered maybe 2 or 3 sessions about that, where we presented body scan and we presented emotional regulation. Sometimes I think we also need to teach our beloved sons and daughters just naming the emotion.
Yes.
One of the things actually I was gonna address when I talked is we have something called the emotional wheel, where you actually see what is in the surface, what is beneath, and what is underneath. But as you said, Nardeen, it all starts by doing body scan. Where do you feel icky, or where does it hurt, and so forth. Let's go to Mina Thomas.
Hello?
Yes, Habibi.
Oh, hi, Nardeen. Thanks for the lecture. I just had a comment to me that a couple of, 2 years ago, we had a lecture about, there's a book called The 5 Languages of Love. I can't remember who wrote it. But there is an online survey that you can take. It tells you what type of person you are and how you express your love so that you can understand others. So I thought, it would tie nicely with your talk. But other than that, thanks for the talk. And Abuna, if you can give me just a couple of minutes at the end, I just have an announcement to make.
Absolutely, Habib. Absolutely. Oh, I think when Mina presented to us the 5 languages of love, it was by Chapman, I guess, the author. It was amazing.
Yes, Chapman.
Yes, it was amazing, actually. And yes, at the end, you can have all the time you want. Hani, do you have something to say? Hani William?
Yes, Abuna, please, if you don't mind. At first, nice to meet Nardeen virtually, and thank you so much for your presentation. It's an outstanding one. And in fact, my sister-in-law, her name is Nardeen as well. So the only question I have, it pertains to conflict resolution. How could you possibly, or what kind of recommendations or strategies you would highly recommend on a partner that sitting down and discussing and identifying the issues would be very much beneficial for both sides? And how could you persuade that person that, again, it is beneficial for, both sides? That's one. The second one, which is a part of, same topic here. It is, I see it very critical if that partner or that person, when situations, things are normal, things are fine, we're having great, moments, great time. However, the problem still persists, which it has never been discussed or, found out resolutions for it. And at the same time, that person still doesn't want to sit down and discuss it and try to work hard on resolving the issue. So what kind of recommendations or strategies you would highly recommend in such situations? That's it. Over.
Awesome. Thank you for that question. I just want to make sure that I got the question correctly. So the first one is how to kind of get buy-in from the other person that this might be helpful. Is that what you're trying to get?
Right, to get that person, hey, let's sit down, you know, even though, yeah, you took a day or 2 or 3 days to calm down the situation, you know, for things, you know, because of course you don't want to resolve any issues while you're in the middle of the volcano eruption. So you take a day or 2 until things calm down, and then hopefully that partner would come down and, you know, sit down and start, you know, addressing whatever concerns, issues, problems, or risks that might affect the relationship down the road. But that person, you know, the only excuse they use is, well, you know, well, things are going well now, so we shouldn't be talking about it. And we know the outcome, you know, a bunch of excuses and justifications for not, or trying to run away or from facing the facts, facing the problems, and identifying the problems and finding solutions to resolve it.
Right. No, that's
kind of like, the fear is there. I don't know why, but anyway.
Yeah, no, and that's a huge point, because there can be so much fear associated with this. And I think
thank you.
So much fear. It takes years, and I think it's important to think about, where is that fear coming from? What is the assumption that is there? And validating that, yes, this is scary, and also providing a sense of reassurance for that fear. Yes, I see this is scary. Why is it scary? Let's talk about that. Sometimes we have to talk about talking before we can talk. So taking a step back and having that discussion, and a part of asking someone to be vulnerable and having a difficult conversation is modeling that yourself. That's the way to develop trust and to decrease the other person's fear. To model being vulnerable, identify your feelings, identify your fears, allow them to see that there is this common space with which you can work. The basis for any sort of conflict resolution is trust that you are both on the same page, on the same level, and have the same goals. A person is not motivated to do something scary unless they see a benefit for it. And I think thinking about having difficult conversations as an investment in the relationship, not just to make a problem go away, but to make sure that the more time that you have, there are less of these problems. And not because these problems are bad, but because you want their life to be easier and your life to be easier. The goal for having difficult conversations is that the net, it'll be net positive in the end. It'll be really difficult to have this conversation, but it'll reduce more difficult conversations in the future. But honestly, it is difficult. And I think the first step is acknowledging, yes, this is difficult. Yes, this is scary. And I'm here with you. Something can be scary, and that can be the first step to building trust and building comfort. And having those difficult conversations is just allowing the person to be scared and being there with them while they're scared. That can be the first difficult conversation. But that's a really, really good question.
Thank you, Nardeen. Thank you so much. I have a lot of questions, but I do respect the time of the presentation. I'd like to give other opportunities for other people to address or ask questions as well. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, and thank you for the answer, Nardeen. I really love your response to that, and I thank you for raising the concern, Hani, because this is really a practical point.
Yes.
But as Nardeen said at the beginning, establishing the idea that we are one team and we have one benefit. And I like when you highlighted the importance of cost-benefit analysis. If we continue like that, how much is it costing us? And if we talk about it, what are the benefits? Doing that, I think, would speak to everybody. Obviously, somebody who can say, your conflict is costing you thousands of dollars in counseling therapy. Another person could say, well, it's costing you your peace in the heart, your sleep at night. Another one who could say it is costing you your vacation, whatever. So everybody has a cost-benefit analysis where they focus. But that's another very wonderful topic. Maybe we can have another topic just precise for that. Creating a safe space. What do you think?
I would love that. That's a whole topic in of itself. Yes.
Alas, you can start planning that for us.
Done.
Dr. Suhair?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the invitation and for this wonderful talk. I really appreciated that. First, I loved the idea of getting the whole conflict issue is just an unfulfilled need. It's not more than that. That's very, very important. And then all the comments actually gave so much insights into that. But I have actually a question which is close to that was raised by Peter, the differences between males and females. But I'm not going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about the differences between different characters, because we all start a relationship with all our characters and our genes and our the way we were raised, and it's a little bit difficult to harmonize that. What do you think about that issue?
I am 100% with you. We all come into relationships with needs, and we also come into relationships with scars. And this doesn't mean we were like beaten as kids or we were traumatized, but we have lived a life where we have created these rules in our mind for how we have to be in order to receive love, or how we have to be worthy. And a lot of times these rules aren't actually real, but we come into the relationship and each person has a set of rules in their mind. Someone can say, I have to be strong. I have to show that I am reliable. The other person can say, I have to be accommodating. I have to please the others to be loved. And so I think figuring out what these rules are that you have in your mind and sharing them with each other and identifying what your rules, what the tendencies you have based on these rules, and figuring out, do these tendencies, are they helpful to the relationship, or do they actually create a cycle where both of us are kind of operating in the same way that is natural for us to operate, but it's not fulfilling, it's not satisfying. And if we can see our relationships as an opportunity to have a different experience, to be able to feel something different than we do in our daily lives, that we can put these rules away when we come into our relationship, it can be incredibly fulfilling, but also takes a lot of work, a lot of introspection, a lot of difficult conversations, and a lot of difficult conversations with ourselves as well, that can be so beneficial.
I think this last point is that how to identify our rules. It's exactly the same that was raised by your dad as well, how to identify our feelings. It's not that easy, I should say.
I would love to have a talk on that as well, because that's a whole, it should be taught in schools, honestly. And they're starting to teach it in schools actually now, because we're seeing how important it is and how none of us know how to do it.
Thank you so much once more.
Thank you.
It was really, really nice. Thank you. Thank you, Abuna. Thank you for the opportunity.
Dr. Suhair is joining us from Stockholm. She is a very close to the heart friend of myself and
thank you.
She is, her
mutual feeling.
Service with the youth is actually amazing. We actually last youth convention, where we invite youth from high school and university, we take the topic emotions, and we talk a lot about emotions, and emotion that hurts and emotion that heals, how pain could be not only in vain, but it could be a gain, all of this. And I think I still get many requests from youth that we need to do even deeper, because
yes,
talking about emotions, identifying the feelings and the moods and all of that is something that we like sounds gibberish to the majority.
yeah, yeah.
Well, definitely.
It is really.
Nardeen, you have another topic to prepare here.
Yeah, I think you should talk
before
many more times, actually.
Absolutely. Before I ask Ala to comment and Hala, there is a lovely feedback coming from YouTube or coming through messaging. Somebody's saying the topic covered today is not only beneficial to premarital or newlyweds, it can also be very crucial to people who have been married for so long. One tiny comment, just be careful when we discuss a conflict, that the point of conflict doesn't take much time so that we don't end up giving Satan or the serpent an opportunity to reignite the fire again, which is actually true. We need to speak about the problem. We need to be very precise, but we don't need to drag unnecessarily. What do you think?
Absolutely. And that's why it's so helpful to be specific about the problem, figure out a solution to the problem, and we get to move on. And yeah, that's exactly why we want to build that skill. Amazing point. I really appreciate that.
Sonia is saying, even if we said to talk about a conflict, maybe Nardeen said that earlier, 30 minutes quality time is more than enough. And in fact, Anna, because you talked also about food and dinner and all of that, I always like to highlight the sandwich model, where people have a core problem, whether steak or chicken, that's the problem, but it is surrounded by salad and by bread. So we are specific, but we have to, I would say, provide band-aid around the problem. Yeah, we need to talk about it. Yes, when you said that yesterday, it really made me feel uncomfortable. I felt disrespected. Or when you invited these friends without me knowing, you put me on the spot. But I know that you love me and I know that you didn't mean to, but in the future, can we try not to? Kind of, right?
Totally. There has to be a specific goal of the conflict. A lot of times people think of conflict as a way to vent. That's not what conflict is. We have to have a goal. What is our goal going into this? Getting that need met, figuring out what that is, talking about it, and then we move on. 100%. I really agree with you with that point.
طيب علاء وبعدين هالة or هالة وبعدين علاء, whoever is first يعني.
Let's go with هالة بعدين علاء عشان I stay safe.
طب هالة اتفضلي.
Thank you, Nardeen, for the very nice talk. And it's interesting when you sit and listen to your daughter talking about all these things. Yeah, I'm so proud of you. Good job. And I might ask you some few questions after. And I'm looking forward to your next presentation.
Awesome. And I'll send you a bill. Don't worry.
I know, waiting for the bell.
Nardeen, English is different for me than for you. When you say fighting, we need to learn fighting. I went and looked at the dictionary and looked at the definition of fighting. And being Egyptian, the definition in my mind, that's stuck in my mind, makes me feel this is something I don't like to do. But now as I look at the dictionary, I see that fighting can be argument or opposing opinions. So just the understanding of the word for me as Egyptian is different and gives me already like, oh, chills. I'm going to fight. I don't like that.
I think you actually bring up a really good point, and it's not just in Arabic, it's also in English too. But we want to think about the relationship between language and culture, because the word fight here also has a very negative connotation. Our culture tells us to try to avoid these negative situations, and then that's actually not true, but then it creates it makes it this thing. So I think that's why it's important for us to create our own definition and have our own understanding of what is the purpose of this behavior, and then we can call it whatever we want. We can call it problem solving, we can call it like boo-boo time, we can call it whatever we want to call it. The goal is that we have these needs, they're not met. How do we communicate it? And yes, our culture and all cultures, I think, in society right now are very conflict averse.
I have the question I have for you is how to break a taboo that's not allowed to be touched, and it is sitting under the surface, boiling, and the relationship is going. We try to make it work, but I started the relationship with this partner thinking that the sexuality that God gave me is something to celebrate, to be proud of, to be happy with. It's blessed, it is honored, it's everything. If you meet a partner, that the partner looks at sexuality as this is demeaning, this is inferior, this is the act of the devil, and we are allowed to do it only because God knows we have to be dirty, this is a taboo. And this undermines respect of partners to each other and leaves you with unspoken, like a serious issue that can break the foundation of relationships. So I don't know if Abuna or yourself can just like give us, is there a way to break this taboo and say it is healthy to talk about sexuality? It's not like we are dirty, we are ugly, we belong to the devil. When God made Adam and Eve, he designed them the way he designed them. Mm-hmm. He was very proud of us with his creating us. And we should be able to talk about these things in relationships. So I don't know. I know it's out of the spectrum of your talk, but I want Abuna or yourself to say, guys, maybe there is an opening to the conversation that you can start by saying this or saying that.
Well, it sounds like you literally just said it, so I'm not sure what it is that you're asking for.
I think I understand, Habib, what he meant. Let me paraphrase that, and I'll give you the mic after. I think maybe what Ala wants to say is one of the areas that really of concern that might be a conflict, but under the rug. People don't talk about it because they want to avoid taboo. Is the area of satisfaction and intimacy and sexuality and all of that. Mm-hmm. Is there any way or any advice, any recipe, how to tackle that sexually related conflict without feeling that you are driven by lust and without feeling that you are really thinking just about your desire and all of that? I hope that this is what you meant to say, Ala. That's my
Thank you, Abuna. This is exactly what I want to say, and this is exactly how people look at it from different points, and they get to feel like, oh, it's too bad, we don't want to talk about this, because they think of it as lust and desire.
Before I give Nardeen the mic, I just want to say something that she might correct me. But I remember once I was actually reading a book about intimacy, and I hope that the numbers are correct in my mind, but it's about maybe 60% of marital problem are because of sexuality, and the resolution to the majority of marital problem could also start by reviving a healthy sexual life. That's what I was reading, but Nardeen, you can take it from here.
Yeah, no, the first part for sure, the fact that the majority of couples, it's funny, the majority of couples that I work with, they come in and they talk about all of these issues and they're so nervous to even talk to their therapist. The reason that they're coming is about issues in intimacy. And I think a lot of it comes from the idea of shame. Talking about sex, sexuality, your desires, it can be the same as talking about anything else that you have a feeling of shame about. And we need to figure out where that feeling of shame comes from and to create a space of safety to discuss this, to allow the shame to come out. The problem with shame is that it kind of puts us away in a corner, and then we become very isolated and we feel very, very alone. So I think a good way to start the conversation is to actually have a conversation about this and make it quite normal to talk about what you're like, what you even think about the topic, not about your own sexual relationship, but the topic in general, sexuality in general, the expression of love. Do you see it as this? Do you see it as this? One way to make something feel less intimidating is taking it out of your own personal experience and talking about it in theory. Understand how we even think about the topic, and then think about how that relates to how you deal with it. But a lot of times there's the tiptoeing into something when there's been so much like hiding around it. But again, creating that sense of safety and that sense of trust that when you express something, it's not going to be held against you. You're not going to feel like it's just an exploration. And to realize that a lot of people don't know how they feel about these things because they haven't thought about them. So if they talk, they're probably trying to figure it out as they're saying it, and allowing space for awkwardness or misunderstanding or not being sure. And again, thinking of it as something that you're exploring together to get a better understanding of it. So I don't know if that addresses it or if that's a helpful way of looking at it, but these conversations need to happen early, and they need to happen yeah, I think they do need to happen early, because it's one of those things that you can get into a conspiracy of silence and then no one really talks about it. And it's such a shame because it's a really big part of a healthy relationship.
Yeah, absolutely, Habibi. That's lovely. And I think we also, it's actually Ala who does that for the premarital here. We kind of spare 2 or 3 sessions about sexuality, and last time Ala talked to us about even sexually transmitted disease and how and all of that, just to break that taboo, as he said, or that stigma.
Takes practice.
It takes, yes, absolutely. And honestly speaking, we need to look at everything from the eyes of the Bible, and the Bible elevates that relationship into a very high sacred spot. So we need to respect what God designed in us, and we need also to in a pure way. And purity doesn't mean the lack of, but purity means how this brings us satisfaction to glorify God and to love one another more.
Absolutely.
Just one last comment before I let you go about the word fight. There is actually in the Bible, St. Paul made a statement when he said, I fought the good fight, which means I put my effort, struggle. So there is the good fight and the bad fight. A good fight is when we work together to achieve something that is hard to achieve. And basically that's exactly what you meant to say. عشان بس علاء والديكشنري بتاعه will be on the same page. I fought the good fight. So there is a good fight. That's different than role distribution, where I fight and I agree with my wife, مثلا, I will be the one to hit and you'll be the one to receive. That's a different fight.
Yes.
English is my second language, Abuna, so I can always play this card. It's my second language.
Right. Nardeen, there is no word to express how much we are so happy to have you and how happy we are to have you again and again. We'll definitely organize for the next sessions and the one after. I want to thank everybody who joined us, whether through YouTube or through Zoom. We have people from Texas, people from Stockholm, people from Vancouver and Winnipeg here. So basically, thank God for your talk and thank God for this opportunity. Mina, you had a comment you want to say?
Yes, thanks, Abuna. So God willing, next week, that's Sunday, it'll be the first day of St. Mary's Feast. We want to bring back the grad group back again in the church. So we'll probably be starting at 11 a.m. and we're going to have it in one of the rooms beside the church. So you can come through the church door, and on the right to the sideway hall, there is the Sunday school classes. We're going to have that. And we hope to see everyone back again as restrictions are easing and are being lifted up. Thanks.
Thank you, Habib, for the announcement. And just make sure that we all follow the public order health guideline and so forth. God be with you, and let us conclude by prayer. And the name of the Father and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Our Lord Christ, we thank you so much for always allowing us to meet with your lovely sons and daughters. Thank you for the talk today. I pray, O Lord, that you reward Nardeen for all the time, the effort, the thoughts, the presentation, the ideas that she presented to us, so that we can learn how we can handle a crucial yet essential aspect of our life, where we need to discuss conflicts and how can we deal with them. Oh Lord, obviously nobody likes to be in conflict, but they are part of our reality. We cannot avoid them, or will be not honest. So honestly, we want to take this lesson and want to put it in your hands, so that you can show us the perfect way that we can handle these kind of issues, in the sense and the motivation of working together collaboratively as a team to resolve problems, to resolve issues, and to plan future life. Bless everybody who attended with us, and bless these words, and hear us and pray thankfully. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Now the love of God the Father, the grace of the only begotten Son, our Lord God and Savior Jesus Christ, the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Go in peace. The peace of the Lord be with you. ربنا معاكم. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.